Is everyone able to hear me? Always want to make sure I'm not muted. Okay, great. So I'll kind of go through my story and how and why I'm here today. So growing up, kind of had a very normal childhood as an athlete, as a female athlete. I didn't always climb rocks, but I used to climb the roof of my parents' house. I used to climb all of the buildings at my school. Very athletic, playing football with the boys, soccer with the boys, wrestling. I always had bruises on my shins, just complete athlete. And by the time I was in 6th grade, I started noticing that I was kind of having a hard time keeping up with others. I still was keeping up with others, but I was finding I was out of breath a lot. My lungs were hurting. I'd have heart palpitations where it would feel like my heart would kind of skip a beat. And so I'd go to the doctor quite often, letting him know, hey, I think I have heart problems. Like there's just something weird that I'm going through that others aren't. They performed stress tests on me, and doctors told me, you know what, maybe it's asthma. It's probably just hormones. You're at that age. You definitely don't have heart problems. You wouldn't be able to keep up with the boys if you had heart problems. So I just continued to play sports. Then I got in ballet, did ballet pre-professionally, and I was still finding that I was having the same issues where I would get tired before the other girls, just exhaustion, fatigue, chest pain, trouble breathing. Doctors just kept giving me inhalers saying, no, what, you probably just have asthma. And I kept telling them, well, every time I use an inhaler, my heart beats really fast and I feel dizzy, I don't feel good. No, it's fine, the inhaler's working, just keep using it. So doctors continued ignoring me. I kept bringing up that I wasn't feeling well. And eventually I just ignored it and I stopped fighting because I was told, nope, it's just hormones, you're just a female, this is what girls go through. So then that kind of now puts me towards adulthood, and I'm 22 years old. I get pregnant with my son, had a very normal pregnancy, very easy pregnancy, no issues. And then by the time he was about a year and a half, 2 years old, I was at work one day and my heart started beating just really fast out of nowhere. I checked my pulse and it was 150 beats per minute. And I was just sitting at my computer doing nothing. I was sweating profusely, just breathing really hard. My lungs were hurting. Didn't really know what to do. I had been sick with a cold, so I thought, you know what, maybe I'm just sick. So I left work. I went to the doctor's office, and they noticed my high heart rate, and I had let them know, yeah, I'm sick, I'm not feeling well. I think I have some lung problems, and they treated me and said, oh yeah, your heart rate does seem kind of off, like maybe you should go to the hospital. And I was like, no, I have too much to do. I need to pick my son up from daycare. I need to go back to work. I can't miss work. And the doctors really didn't fight me on it. And they're like, okay, just try to get some rest. Hopefully your heart rate will go down. I remember that night just staying up all night because my heart rate didn't go down. And then finally, after 10 hours of a heart rate at 150 beats per minute, it finally started settling back down to 100 beats per minute. And I thought, cool, we're great, we're good. Kind of moved on with my life. Well, then a night happened that I couldn't ignore. Just 2 months after that, I was trying to fall asleep, couldn't fall asleep, and then all of a sudden, like, the fast heart rate happened again. And I was checking my heart rate, and it was 180 beats per minute. My son was asleep, my son's dad was asleep, and I was like, well, I don't really want to wake anyone up over this. They're tired already. So I start Googling, of course, because, you know, that's kind of what we do. It's like, I'll just go to Google. I was like, how to slow down a fast heart rate. And it was like, throw water on your face, put an ice pack on your chest. So I did that for about 2 hours. And then I found breathing to be a little bit more difficult. I was starting to get really dizzy and lightheaded. And so I woke up my son's dad and was like, okay, I need to get to the hospital, but I don't want to take our 2-year-old son with us, so let's just drive over to my parents' house first and drop him off there. So I call my parents, let them know, hey, something weird is happening with my heart. Can I drop my son off? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. So I dropped my son Garrick off at their house, so that's like 30 minutes that way. and then 30 minutes back to the hospital. And I get there and they hook me up to a machine and they tell me that I'm going between AFib and ventricular tachycardia and pre-ventricular heart rates. So I have these really dangerous arrhythmias that are essentially happening in my body, and they told me that with this happening, at any point in time my heart could stop, and so I should have come in sooner. So I get there and they get me back to a room, immediately start hooking me up to all these machines. And then they tell me they're going to give me something called adenosine. And what adenosine does is it essentially kind of stops your heart and restarts it. So I was like, oh, sure, okay, go ahead, give me an IV. And they said, well, it's going to be kind of painful. So they have one person behind me with an IV bag holding on to it. They have someone with this shot, which I thought was like, oh, just a little shot. But what they do is they put it in your arm, they slam it down really hard. They have the person in the back with an IV bag, and they squeeze the IV bag really hard. And then all of a sudden I felt this horrible pain go across my chest, over my head, down my other arm, down my other leg, and then back up. And it was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? They're like, oh yeah, it stops your heart. And so my heart stopped. It started beating a couple seconds later, still had a fast heart rate, still had the arrhythmia. So then they give me twice the dose of that. Once again, it didn't work. It wasn't slowing my heart rate down. And so I'm just sitting there wondering, well, when can I get back home to my son? Not realizing how big of an issue this was, because it had never been treated as a huge issue. And that's when a doctor that I'd never met came in and told me that I was in a really, really dangerous arrhythmia. I would die unless they could essentially stop this arrhythmia from happening. And I had to sign a piece of paper allowing them to cardiovert me. And that they basically stated that this consent form acknowledges that my heart could stop by them cardioverting me and I might not wake up. It could put me in a more dangerous arrhythmia, or I will awaken from it and I'll be okay. And so I had to sign this piece of paper. I told my son's dad, do not tell my parents what's happening, just call them after to let them know what happened and whether or not I made it. So they put me under. I wake up, which I was very thankful that I woke up, because had I not, my 2-year-old son at the time would not have remembered who I was, and this thing would have just kind of come out of nowhere. And I just have this huge burn mark on my chest and on my back from the cardioversion, from the electrical waves. And so I had about 30 minutes where my heart rate was normal, and then my arrhythmia started again. And then they had to give me even more medication in order to stop it. So then that kind of takes me over now, my life being changed by just the signature on this piece of paper. So now I'm an individual who definitely has heart problems, but they don't know what. I'm an individual who was also having a thyroid storm and didn't even know. So I ended up having thyroid cancer during the same time, and essentially my arrhythmia saved my life, because they found the cancer, they were able to remove my thyroid, but now I had all of these undiagnosed heart problems. So over the course of the next about 5 years, I was in and out of the hospital, in and out of multiple surgeries, in and out of like the potential of me needing to be cardioverted. I was having arrhythmias every single day. I got really, really sick to the point that at 5'10", I ended up dropping down to about 110 pounds. I just couldn't keep weight on myself. I was really sick. I was really weak. I was sleeping downstairs on the couch because I didn't have the strength to actually walk upstairs to sleep in my own bed. During this whole time, I was in college getting my degree in molecular biology. I was working full-time, and I had a son. So I still had to figure out how to balance everything while also being sick and not really putting myself first. The downfall of my relationship with my son's father had happened during this time, where there were a lot of cracks in the marriage, where I was finding like I didn't have support. I was going to have to do this all on myself, and I had to figure it out. I was really sick. I wasn't getting better. Medications weren't working, and doctors really didn't know what to do. So one day I just got really angry and decided I'm going to fight for myself, because at this point in time I am just dying on my couch. Nothing's happening. I'm not getting better. So during this time, deciding to fight for my life, I decided to end my marriage because I knew it wasn't healthy. And I was told, you will never be able to do this without me. And my comment back was, watch me do this. And I was sitting on the couch one day with my son, and we were watching rock climbing, and we were watching American Ninja Warrior. And I had told my son that back when I was in high school, they had Ninja Warrior in Japan, and that was the original one that came out. And as an athlete, I always saw the show. I wanted to do it. I thought it was really cool. And my son looks at me at 4 years old and was like, Mom, you should do this. And I look back at him and I'm like, Garrett, like, I can barely walk up the stairs. How am I going to do something like this? And he says to me, he's like, well, why do you have excuses? And I realized, I'm like, here's this 4-year-old who's calling me out because I'm not able to see the bigger picture. And I was too scared to fight because it was scary, like not knowing when I'd need to go to the hospital again, not knowing when I would need another surgery or need to be cardioverted. And I looked at him and his little face and was like, okay. I'm like, I pinky promise you, I'm going to get better and I'm gonna do American Ninja Warrior. So my fight started that same day. I was like, know what? I want to be able to sleep in my own bed. So I walk up the stairs, instantly have an arrhythmia, and I'm like, just breathe through it, just breathe through it. And I was able to sleep in my own bed that night. So then every day started working on walking up the stairs multiple times every day, essentially throwing myself in arrhythmia, just to try to get better, just to try to get my heart stronger. Then I started with walking outside and just doing like little walks around the neighborhood and back. And I'd get back and I'd be out of breath. My heart rate would be really fast. My doctors were supportive, said, no, what, maybe try this heart medication for your arrhythmias. Like, just keep going, just keep trying. I got really good at walking, so then I decided to go to a local track, and I was walking the streets and running the curves. Even though I've been an athlete my whole life, never once have I been a runner at all. So even running the curves was just, it felt awful to me. But I found that I was getting better, I was getting more energy, and rather than having arrhythmias every day, it was happening a couple times per week. So my arrhythmias were already cutting down to like a little bit less. So continued to do that, and then I started eating healthier as well. I started researching foods and what type of foods that I should be eating for my health, and came across a lot of things like kale and spinach and avocado and, you know, all these vegetables that I had never eaten my entire life because I didn't like fruits and vegetables. And I realized I need to start eating clean. My heart is a muscle. I need to start giving my body the nutrients it needs to fight. So I completely changed my diet, really focused on lean meats, lots of fruit, lots of veggies, a lot of really good grains, so that way I could have those good complex carbohydrates for like quick energy. So after I got good at like running, I then started doing Zumba, which I don't know if any of you have done Zumba. It's so much fun. It's a dance workout. The very first class that I went to, I had to sit out every 5 minutes because it was really hard for me to do. And every time I felt my heart beating, it just scared me. It just kind of brought me back to that night when I almost died. Well, I ended up getting really good at Zumba. I was able to keep up, and then I got my instructor license to be a Zumba instructor. Loved that, was able to teach some classes. And then finally I got to this point where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to train for American Ninja Warrior, but what does that look like? I got a Groupon, and I invited my son with me, and we went to, it's called Stoneworks Climbing Gym. It's actually in the Tigard area, and my son came with me to go rock climbing. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't think there were even any other females there in the gym, and I put my harness on and I start doing something called bouldering, which is just like ropeless climbing, just kind of like going across that. And again, I had my harness on, and someone was like, oh, why are you wearing your harness? And I was like, oh, I think for safety, I think you're supposed to wear this. And they're like, no, that's only if you have a rope tied to you. So again, I was clueless, no idea what I was doing. I was not good at rock climbing. I was just constantly falling off, but I loved it because it was hard. And every time I'd do a big move, my heart would go like boom, 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 boom. It would beat so fast. But then I would find that it would then slow down. So I'm like, okay, I think this is good. So as I kept working out and I kept climbing and I kept eating healthy, I did that for about 1 year, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to submit an application for American Ninja Warrior. So I put my video together, I submitted it, and looking back at it, it's like I laugh because it's like I was still learning and still growing. I didn't get a call back, and I remember my son being so heartbroken. He's like, "You didn't get a call?" I'm like, "Nope, didn't get accepted." I'm like, "I need to get stronger. I need to fight harder. Like, I can do this. I need to be strong enough to keep up with everyone else." So taking that failure, I started working harder. I started climbing harder to the point that I started doing local climbing competitions. Signed up with USA Climbing, continued to do more climbing competitions, both at Nike, both locally, out of state. And then it got to the point where it was time to submit another application a year later for American Ninja Warrior. So I put all of my best videos together, I submitted that, and I got the call. And I ended up getting the call a total of 3 times since 2018. And so I finally did it. I finally fulfilled my promise to my son that I was going to do it. And it's now at the point in time where I work out every single day. I eat clean. I climb quite often, both here as well as outdoors. Every time I go on vacation, it's to climb. I am more active than I've probably ever been in my entire life. I still have heart problems. I still have arrhythmias. I'm still on heart medication to this day. I take that once per day, every night. I do still have arrhythmias that get dangerous, and it still kind of takes me back to that night where I just kind of break down a little bit. I cry, I get a little fearful just because I don't want there to be another situation where I have to go back to the hospital. But it has taught me to take my health more seriously. When something is happening and I can't get my heart rate under control, I call 911 every time. I take an ambulance every time. I do what I need to do to make sure that I'm still here for my son. So if this has taught me anything, it's that, like, as women, we really need to take care of ourselves if something's wrong. Even if you're afraid to call 911, hospitals are really not that scary. I love going to the hospital because every time I've gone so far, they take really good care of me. They put me in those comfortable beds. They prop my feet up. I get a lot of pillows. I really like the food that they serve me. It's all heart healthy food. Usually get a cup of tea. So for me, it's kind of been a nice escape every time I have to go. I know they're going to take really amazing care of me. My son has ridden in the back of ambulances a few times. He really likes it. He's gotten to sit up front. So for him, it's less traumatizing than I thought it would be for him. But the fight is 100% worth it, and through this, I'm not doing American Ninja Warrior anymore, but I still am doing climbing competitions. I have one next week, which I'm really excited about, and my son will be climbing with me in the competition, and then my husband as well, because through this process, I ended up meeting an absolutely amazing man who supports my climbing, he supports my fitness, he supports adventure. We're always taking crazy vacations, going and hiking or climbing somewhere, and it's been great. So through this and through trauma, there's still PTSD that I experience. Most people that would see me working out would think, like, there's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't have heart problems. But I do find that I have to work out harder than others. Sometimes I have to push myself harder. I'm really stubborn. If I want something, especially if I want a really tough climb, I will push myself to get it. For example, there's this really tough climb at Nike, and I threw myself at it about 20 times. I finally got it yesterday with a sinus infection and pneumonia. I am on antibiotics, so I am getting better, but I was like, I want this so bad, like, I'm gonna fight. And I came down from it, and I told the person in the rock gym, I was like, oh my gosh, my heart rate hit 191, my lungs hurt so bad, but I got it, I got that climb. And so I take that fighting mentality that I have from working out, like kind of pushing back past those mental barriers, and I use that in everyday life, because I know that's going to save my life. Because when you have heart problems, you have to fight. You have to find that fire to keep breathing, to be able to call 911, to push yourself to do the right thing. So all of this has taught me a lot of lessons, and I would honestly not change anything for the world.
my God. Molly, you are such an